Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Juan's World, and because you can see my smiling face, you realize that I'm not going to be cooking today. I didn't do too badly over the weekend with my cooking, but didn't do anything tremendously original. I did make a steak and kidney pie, and I did do some slightly different things with it, with the crust. Can't get ox kidneys here in Cambodia, so as usual I had to use pig's kidneys, and actually ended up getting quite a few, so I was able to freeze some. And I also know that if I start talking about steak and kidney pudding or steak and kidney pie, I'm probably going to turn off about 80 to 90% of you, and the 10% that's remaining already knows how to do it, so that's not much good. But I've still got some pork kidneys remaining. Might do something like deviled kidneys, very famous Victorian breakfast dish, which I make. Don't know, but that will be next week. What I want to do today is to continue the saga that I started on Friday of my son's journeys from China to the United States, from Kunming in Yunnan province to Binghamton in New York State, where he's going to be taking a PhD in anthropology. Now it's okay with me, but when he first decided to major in anthropology as an undergraduate, I was really pretty surprised, slash horrified, because he began doing 2 degrees, a Bachelor of Music in concert trumpet performance and a Bachelor of Science in experimental physics. Thought that was fine, and then in his second year he decided to change, partly because his trumpet instructor had always said, even from the start, even from the time of the audition when he spoke to me about it, that he didn't think that Badger would be able to fully finish the degree as a concert trumpeter. And Badger wasn't interested either. He just wanted to take it as far as he could take it. Doing 2 degrees at once was going to take him 5 years. And in the end he gave up the trumpet first, and then he gave up the physics second, and he spent his last 2 years doing a major in anthropology, which at the outset he did because it was one of the few degrees that he could complete in 2 years, because a lot of the others had requirements that would have taken him many more years. But he'd already done the preliminary requirements for anthropology. And he had a father who's an anthropologist, he had a mother who was an anthropologist, he had been with me on field work as a visiting scholar and fellow at various institutions. So it's kind of natural. It's just like how, in a way, I fell into teaching. I got my degree, and by the time I finished my degree in theology, I was not interested in going into the church, even though eventually I did. But at the time, I was pretty much of an atheist, and some people would say I still am, although I'm ordained. That's another story entirely. But I didn't know what to do when I had graduated, because I didn't want to be a missionary, didn't want to be a minister. And, various things cropped up. I was thinking, gosh, they're taking on apprentices in various places like church stonemasonry, I thought about. But then I dropped into a teaching job. I was just talking to one of the members of my church, and his wife said, "Do you know how to teach technical drawing?" I sort of took a double take and said, "Well, yeah, I can." She said, "Well, do you want a job?" And 2 weeks later I was teaching technical drawing in a high school. And being a teacher came fairly naturally, because both my parents were teachers. My elder sister was a teacher, And so it was something that was just around me all the time. The same with a student of mine whose mother and father and both of his brothers were doctors. And as a junior, he was taking anthropology with me, and he was saying, I do not want to be a doctor. He graduated, and then he started taking medical courses, and now he's a doctor. And it doesn't happen to everybody, obviously, but what you grow up with makes it comfortable to go into that profession, which strikes back at what I was talking about last time. It's not genetic. There's nothing genetic about it at all. There's no gene for being a teacher or gene for being a doctor or anything else. There are a lot of environmental factors that just make it easier for you to go into the field that your parents are in, because you know it. You hear them talking about it as a child. You hear them talking about their colleagues and their pressures and their excitements and all of that. And it just seems natural. I can't imagine, for example, going into business, ever, or being a stockbroker. But I could imagine that if my father or my mother had been a stockbroker, I could imagine quite easily going into the field and being helped, just as I'm helping my son to get his PhD, which is the topic of this rather long ramble at the beginning of my video, of how I was helping him, not in his PhD, although I'm doing that also, but just in how I helped him to get from China to Binghamton, which was horrendous. So just to recap, if you didn't see the first video, my son left Kunming last Wednesday. He took a train up to Chengdu, and then from Chengdu he flew to Guangzhou, which you can kind of consider to be a suburb of Hong Kong. It's in mainland China, and the flights are somewhat different. And I didn't quite understand why he had gone to Chengdu, which is well north of Kunming, and then gone all the way back down south towards the coast. But his wife explained to me. I didn't fully understand it, but it made some sense. That is, she did all the planning. From Guangzhou he flew to Los Angeles, and then from Los Angeles he flew to JFK in New York, and then the last leg was bus from New York to Binghamton. And in my last video I talked about the steps pretty much leading up to his trans-Pacific flight. And I was mentioning how I was feeling really stressed out as a father, which I hadn't felt for many years, because he's been married for 5 years. And to the parents who are watching, when your child gets married, you have a feeling of relief. Like, okay, finally I don't have to be the complete support for everything, because my child has a spouse who can help. And it doesn't matter whether the spouse is a husband or a wife, it's just there's someone else in the family looking after that child, not a child, but child in the sense of offspring. And so I was fine. But then when he left his wife, which I also know has got to be extremely sad for him, although he has left her before for shorter periods, But this time is going to be a lot longer because she doesn't have a visa for the United States as yet, and we don't know when. It could be another year. So he might be in university for a year on his own, which I will say, on the one hand, is a very good thing because it means he has no distractions. He can just pay attention to his courses. But it'll be emotionally difficult. And so when he left, it was emotionally difficult for me too, and I felt the need to take over in terms of being a support system. And I felt really bad every time he got on a plane because I knew that for sometimes it was just a couple of hours, like Chengdu to Guangzhou, Guangzhou to Los Angeles, 15 hours without contact, and then another 9, I think it was, to New York without contact. And I just kind of, did my thing. Then he got to New York. I had booked him a room in a hotel near JFK, which is another whole horrendous story, which I won't go into right now. But he did, every time he stopped down, good lad, got me on text on WeChat, which is the Chinese version of, I guess, I don't know, Instagram or Twitter, or one of those messaging apps. It's a very good one. We can use it for voice and video as well as for text. And he would say, okay, I just landed in LAX, I'm now getting through immigration, blah, blah, like he kept me on pace. And then got to the hotel. Didn't tell me the problems there, but I did find them eventually. Then got the first jab of the Pfizer vaccine, very important. He had to tell a few small white lies. He called it a made-up sob story, but he was able to get the vaccine because he only had about 5 or 6 hours in New York. He went into Manhattan and got the jab, and then came back out and slept. Hadn't slept for like 3 days. I don't know how he does it. He never sleeps on airplanes, and he'd left on the Wednesday. Well, it's actually 2 days. He got there Friday night. Friday morning, and he'd crossed the international date line and gone into a time zone that was 12 hours behind the time zone in China. So it was really actually 3 days for him, although on the calendar and it looks like 2. So he'd not slept for 3 days, got the jab, got back to the hotel, zonked out, and then proceeded to take the bus to Binghamton. And the bus was 4.5 hours from Port Authority in New York to Binghamton. And he texted me, I think, once, like saying, I'm on the bus. And then I didn't hear anything. And I'm just thinking, what's happening? But, don't panic. There's nothing I can do about it. But then he gets to Binghamton. It's about, I think, 5 o'clock in Binghamton. I think that, because it was around 4 o'clock here in Cambodia. And he says, I don't know what to do. Because he's in this bus station in Binghamton and there is no one there, and there is no taxi rank, and he tells me that it's the worst rain he's ever seen in New York State, and that's saying something because he lives in New York all of his life, and there's a tornado warning, and he doesn't know how to get to his Airbnb. So I said, well, I'll talk to the Airbnb host, which is another interesting story. I booked his Airbnb for a week in Binghamton. It was, good reviews and everything, and I booked it. But when I booked it, I then sent a message. You have to do it through Airbnb's system, and I wrote to the host and said, I'm Juan, I'm booking this for my son Badger. And then the host wrote back and she said, well, I don't do that. Your son will have to book it himself because I don't deal with third parties. Great. I just said, okay, we're now in New York again. That sort of thing would never happen in anywhere in Southeast Asia. If I've got money and I need to give it to you for something, and you and you want my money, you'll talk to me. It's very, very simple. Even if I don't speak Khmer, you'll find a way to communicate with me because you want my money. Whereas this host said, oh no, you'll have to get him on and book it himself. I'll pay you back on your credit card, and you can then have him book it. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to be using my credit card, and he doesn't have an Airbnb account, so that's a whole process by itself. So in the white lie division, I wrote back to her and I said, well, it's going to be a little complicated because we're going to use the same credit card and he doesn't have an account. So how would it be if he just communicates to you through my account? And she said, oh, well, that would be okay, I guess. So an hour later, I got back on the account and I wrote, hi, this is Badger. You know, I just pretended to be him. And she wrote back and she said, oh, nice to meet you, blah, 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 you know, and she said, I'll send you all the information on the day you're due to arrive. And I said, okay, fine, looking forward to it. All, you know, one of the advantages of the internet age. I used to have a meme that said, and it had a picture of a cat like by a laptop, and it said, on the internet nobody knows you're a cat. Well, on the internet nobody knows that I'm not Badger. So there he is in the pouring rain, tornado warning, nobody around, no taxi rank. And I have no idea where he's going to go. He certainly can't walk there, even if it's within walking distance, because it's just chucking it down in buckets. So I get on Airbnb and I say, this Badger, I've just arrived and there's a big storm, what do I do? And she replies, well, get on the internet and find a taxi service. So, oh, thanks so much for your help. So I did get on the internet. I mean, he couldn't have. He couldn't have called anyone. Even if there had been a number like listed, you know, on a bulletin board or something, he couldn't have called it because he had a Chinese phone, and it didn't work. So I get on the internet. I find a taxi service in Binghamton. Good ratings. Call up. Try not to explain too much about how I'm actually calling from Cambodia for my son at the bus station, but I did say my son is at Binghamton bus station and he needs a bus ride, a taxi ride, and the guy on the other end had a bit of a broad accent. I think he was from India. I'm not sure, or Pakistan or something like that, which would be fairly common. And you know, obviously fine, but communication was not very clear. Now, and Binghamton, if you may not know Binghamton, it's actually a big conurbation of several cities, including Endicott and Johnson City and Binghamton itself. And he wasn't very clear about where to go. But I said, well, just go to the bus station. And he said, okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. So then I text back to Badger, and Badger says, well, there's two exits from the place where I am. There's one exit opposite the DMV of Broome County, and the other exit, which one should I stand at, and what does the taxi look like? And I'm thinking, I have no idea what the taxi looks like. With any luck, it's got a taxi sign on the top, but I don't know which exit. Well, 25 minutes go by and the taxi is not anywhere to be seen. So I call him up again. And I guess he had hands-free phone in the taxi. And he says, oh, it's really pouring down rain. It's really, really hard. I'm having trouble, but I'll get there in 5 minutes. And I mentioned the fact that one exit was opposite the DMV, and he said, no, go to the other exit. So then I go back and I text Badger and I say, okay, it's the other exit. And then about maybe 10 minutes later, I get a text saying, I'm in the taxi. And then like 30 minutes later, really long drive, I get a message saying, I'm at the apartment. So that was pretty complicated. Now, but this is the point I want to make. In all of this, I was like emotionally really stirred up. And of course, like cognitively, I had to be like all together, and I had to get my brain working and get everything just as good as I could and get things working. But I was feeling so bad. I'm just not so much for me, but for my son. And I was thinking, like, where do these emotions come from? Because they're very old emotions in me, you know, thinking exactly the same things when he was driving for the first time, when he was 16 on his own. You know, it's like the same emotions. How do you change your emotions? I know how to change my thoughts. I don't always know how to change my beliefs, but I've got a good idea about cognition. But what about bodily feelings of dread, of fear, of excitement, of joy? How do you control them? And I guess the simple answer is you don't. But you have to somehow, in cases like this, override them with your cognition, because you can't just descend into stress and worry like some people do. I mean, some people just panic and go crazy and can't do anything. But you can train your cognition to overcome your emotions. You know, we should thank our lucky stars that pilots of commercial airlines can do that, because when an engine goes out or when something goes wrong and they're starting to nosedive, the last thing you want them to do is just panic and give up, right? You want their training to take over, but it's the cognition that's taking over. Your emotions and your body are still the same. Your heart rate is still up. Your blood pressure is still up. I didn't take my blood pressure at the time, but I'm sure it was sky high. Like, and just feeling bad in the pit of my stomach. Yeah, I could take a drink of whiskey, I guess. That's what a lot of people do too. Like to control their physical emotions, then use chemical stimulants or depressants or mind-altering drugs or whatever. I can't do that. I don't drink and I don't smoke, don't take drugs. So I have to just use my cognition to get things under control. And that's the mystery. And that's part of that nature-nurture thing that I was talking about last time. It's all learned, the cognition part. But is the emotional part learned? The fact is, it is also. I learned it a long time ago. And I can't unlearn it. That's the part that I'm still trying to wrestle with. Unlearning unhelpful emotions. All right, well, that's my rant for today. Please tell your friends about my videos. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll try to do something different on Friday. Have a good week.